channel, the Walt Disney Animation Studio. What's good? It's a Boydude Reviews, and today we're gonna review The Black Cauldron, a 1985 American animated adventure dark fantasy film produced by Walt Disney Feature Animation in association with Silver Screen Partners, and it was released by Walt Disney Pictures. It's the 25th Disney animated feature film, and it's loosely based on the two books in the Chronicles of Prinadan by Lloyd Alexander, a series of 5 novels that are, in turn, based on Welsh mythology and set in the mythical. And what is this film all about? Set in the mythical land of Pryden, lowly pig herder Taran, voiced by Grant Spardersley, dreams of becoming a gallant knight. Young Taran receives his heroic calling when the evil Horned King, voiced by John Hurt, kidnaps Henwen, a prophesying pig that has been entrusted to Taran. Now, with the help from his furry sidekick Gurgi and Princess Ilonwe, Taran must locate the magical Black Cauldron before the Horned King is able to use his mystical powers to summon an army of the undead. Now, the film was directed by Ted Vernon and Richard Rich, who had directed Disney's previous film, Fox and the Hound, and this was... that's a bit loud. It was the first Disney animated feature film to be recorded in Dolby Digital Stereo, and it was the first Disney film to receive a PG rating, as well as the first Disney animated film to feature computer-generated imagery. And the feature film was distributed by Banana Vista Distribution on July 24, 1985. With a budget of $44 million, it was the most expensive animated film ever made at the time, earning $21.3 million domestically. And the terrible box office failure led to the loss for the studio, putting Walt Disney Feature Animation near bankruptcy. Due to its commercial failure, Disney did not release the film until 1998 on home video. Good golly, 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 golly. This film did badly. And why do you think this film did badly? Well, we'll talk about that. But before I do, let's talk about the good of this film. And, well, I mean, what can I say with this film? I never watched this film before as a kid. I always heard a ton of things about it because a lot of people kept talking about how dark this film was and how it nearly killed Disney, this, that. And honestly, when I first watched it for the very first time, when I watched it and I sat down and I looked at it, I was like, you know what? It's pretty bad. But let's talk about the good stuff. It does have some decent imagery. Like, I have to admit, some of the visual cinematography in this film does look pretty nice, I have to admit. I do feel like they really went all out with this film in terms of the colors and all that, because some of the background looks so gritty, and it has this very violent look to it, and it's got this darkness and grit to it that I think kind of works. It reminds me at times of the Lord of the Rings movie from the 70s, that animated one, because it has this weird kind of gritty look to it that is a bit, oh my gosh, and I quite like some of the background shots. I think they're pretty done really well, and the character just, okay, that's pretty much it in terms of the positives. Yeah, there's a lot of negatives for me, and the negative is not only are the characters all boring and bland and forgettable and dull, but the voice acting is also boring and bland and forgettable and dull. The only character who I remember kind of liking was the villain. He does have a cool, creepy looking design, the Horned King, and he was voiced by John Hurt, the only actor actually giving it their all in the actual animation. Everyone else are kind of half-assing it, and yeah, the problem with this film is the dark elements. I feel like for a Disney film, this was not the right way to go to try and bring it back, Shortly before the film's initial planned release in 1984, a test screening for the rough cut of The Black Cauldron was held at the studio's private theater in Burbank, California. After the film, particularly the climactic Cauldron born sequence, proved to be too intense and frightening for the majority of the children in the audience, most of whom fled the theatre in terror before it was even finished. The newly appointed Disney chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg ordered certain scenes from the Black Cauldron to be cut out as a result of the length and felt that the graphic nature would alienate children and family audiences. And I feel like this is exactly what this film has done, alienated children and family audience alike. This is Disney. Disney animation do fantasy, wonderful stuff. Yes, Disney do have some scary elements in their movies, but at least the visual look of the film looks appealing for them to actually, be whisked away to another world. The problem with this film is that every single shot in this film looks really gritty, it looks pretty spooky, and it has this really uneasiness to it. Some of the character designs will give children nightmares. The visual imagery, which I like, I have to admit, isn't really suitable for young children, and I feel like Disney really made a mistake making this type of movie, The plot as well I wasn't a fan of, and I was actually finding myself yawning at times. It was pretty boring. It's a really boring movie. The plot isn't that interesting. It's pretty dull. It's just, oh, goody God. It's pretty boring, to be honest with you. The compelling characters, none of that. Absolutely none of that. There is no humor. The humor is just obnoxious, having that horrible sidekick of a thing. Oh my gosh, man, were Disney failing at this time. And I don't really want to talk too much about this film just because this movie nearly killed Disney, and I can see why. It's not as bad as people make it out to be, but I can see why. It doesn't look visually appealing, the soundtrack isn't that amazing, the plot is dull, the characters are all boring and forgettable. This is a bland, boring, scary Disney movie all at once. It's bland, it's boring, and it's scary, and children don't like that. And for that, I'm going to give Black Cauldron a 4 out of 10, I'm going to give it an E. Definitely my lowest opinion on the film so far, just because it's so terrible. I never want to see this film again, and I don't recommend it to anyone. But thank you for watching this video. Please share this video, comment down below and tell me what's your favourite Disney flick. With that said, thank you for watching. As always, a Boydude review signing out.